He was angry. That much was clear. Less obvious was how it concerned Philip. Her brother ignored the Earl's command. "Since Hopkins is usually allowed to usher in our guests, I must presume you have a singular reason for interrupting our meal in this irregular way?" "I do." If Lord Norwood noticed the hint of censure in Philip's voice, he gave no sign of it. Philip glanced at his unfinished breakfast, then picked up the paper and began to read. The Earl's gloved hand slapped softly against his thigh, producing a rhythmic tap, tap, tap that sounded unnaturally loud in the otherwise quiet room. Since Charlotte remained an invisible entity, Lord Norwood had not yet spared a glance in her direction. She took the opportunity to study him. His manners left a great deal to be desired, but she couldn't say the same for his looks. He was undeniably handsome, with dark brown hair that showed a tendency to curl and well-appointed features. His lips were firm and finely moulded, his nose straight and patrician, and his slate blue eyes, framed by dark lashes, had faint laugh lines at the corners. However, no hint of humour showed on his face at the moment. Instead, his gaze was stern and unwaveringly fastened on Philip as he bent over the newspaper. After a moment, Philip pushed the paper aside. "I'm as mystified as you are. I've no idea how that came to be published." Lord Norwood gave her brother a hard, assessing stare. "Then perhaps she does," the Earl said tightly. His gaze swung for the first time to Charlotte, with a look so scorching she had to stifle the impulse to place more distance between them. "If you think that, you're barking up the wrong tree." For some reason, Philip looked amused rather than affronted by the Earl's angry insinuations. "However, Charlotte can speak for herself." He slid the newspaper across the table to her. "Have a look at this." She hesitated, wishing the Earl's attention hadn't shifted away from her brother. Lord Norwood glared at her as if she were an annoying insect he'd like to squash. For one defiant moment, she considered refusing, if for no other reason than she didn't care for his rude, high-handed manner. But her curiosity surpassed this rebellious urge. "If I must," she said, deliberately keeping her tone cool and disinterested. She moved her neglected correspondence out of the way, then unhurriedly reached for the paper and drew it over, aware that her lack of haste was fanning the flames of the man's wrath, and yet unable to behave otherwise. Her dislike of him had overruled any spirit of cooperation. She read through the offending item. Then, once more, slowly this time, to make sure she hadn't misunderstood. Cold tendrils of apprehension swirled through her, settling in a tight band around her chest as the implications of the brief paragraphs sank in. No wonder the man was so angry. It was the announcement of her betrothal to the Earl of Norwood. Shocked, she looked back at the Earl, blinking stupidly. How had it come to be in the newspaper? It was false and utterly ridiculous. For heaven's sake, she wasn't even acquainted with the man. But, true or false, it hardly mattered. This announcement could still ignite a firestorm of gossip that would upend her quiet, well-ordered life. "Well?" Lord Norwood demanded. The blood pounded in her ears at his accusatory tone. Her actions required no defence. On the contrary, if anyone had behaved indefensibly, it was the Earl. Even now, apparently convinced of her guilt, he looked as if he'd like to leap over the table and shake a confession out of her. "If by well you mean to imply I have any knowledge of who published this..."